Well, welcome back, everyone. Did everybody enjoy their dinner? Is everybody having a hard time breathing like me? Did everybody get a sheet that has the song for this evening? Change my heart, oh God. Yes? Okay. Also, I wanted to just really quickly remind you that tomorrow's session starts at 7 p.m. So if you come at 6, you're going to have a long time to wait. So let's come at 7. All right? Well, let's sing together to open up this session, worshiping our God with this song. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. Let's sing that again. Change my heart, oh God. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. You are the potter. You are the potter. I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I pray. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I pray. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. May I be like you.
Well, thank you for staying with us to this last hour or two. Thank you for being here. You received me so graciously and so simply, like a great family. You know how it is with people that are true family? You walk in and you're just there, right? And you're just there. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. You're just there, and it's just okay to be there. And you have received me that way, and I thank you very much. I know we have one more session. I'm just kind of taken with the hours we've spent together today with the way you have done that, and I'm very grateful. My teaching is never complete, and it's never final. It always needs some editing. It always needs some correction. I am not infallible in any teaching. Please filter it, correct it, make it right. Part of your responsibility. My ego is not on the line. At least it shouldn't be, should it? So you do that. Well, this is our fourth session. We have looked at the great church family being marked by great glue, the hook and loop of the church. We have looked at great grace this morning. In the last hour together, we looked at great witnessing. And tonight we're going to talk about the church family. A great church family is marked by great truthfulness. I want to try to move through the session tonight and leave some time for some dialogue. It's just so important, and yet I just keep moving, and I rarely leave enough time for that. So hold on, and I'm going to try to make sure that I do that. Have you discovered, I'm sure you have, how hard it is to be a truly honest person? Have you discovered how hard it is to be truly honest with others around you, especially those that are closest to you. The dynamic of our lives is that we can be more honest with strangers than we can with the people closest to us, because there's a lot more at stake in what we say with people that are very close to us. Many times it's the little things in life that keep us stumbling into dishonest moments. Just a little thing. Like a piece of pie. Now that's twice today I've mentioned pie, and you're going to think I'm a pie aficionado. I'm not, I just like it. You know how it goes. You're the fortunate recipient of someone's delicious pie. Whatever kind you want to make it. My wife makes incredible apple pies. And you're the fortunate recipient of one of my wife's apple pies. You have had several pieces, and after the third piece, you feel an addiction coming on. There's one piece left. But your daughter is coming home from college this weekend, and you have all agreed that that last piece of pie is hers. But Friday afternoon, before she gets home, you happen to be in the kitchen. You happen to be alone with this incredible pie, and it's calling your name. It's calling your name in that sweet, smooth way that only great pies can do. And it isn't your fault. That pie was there and it called your name so wonderfully. How could you resist? And before you know it, a fork is in your hand and a bite is in your mouth and another one and another one. Oh no. Before you can say, oops, that piece of pie is gone and the platter is clean. You rinse the platter and you put it away. You turn around and leave satisfied but wondering, and just a short time later, your wife comes into the kitchen and she opens the fridge and says, "Who ate that last piece of pie?" And because you're the only one else in the house, she says, "Honey, did you do that?" It's a rhetorical question. You knew it was for our daughter, and you respond, "What makes you think I did it? You're so suspicious." And you think in your mind, I didn't lie. I didn't tell her I didn't eat it. I just asked her why she was so suspicious. But you know you did lie. Well, that's such an innocent, simple thing. But it illustrates how hard it is for us to really live honestly with people around us, especially with people that matter to us. It's even harder to be honest with ourselves than it is to be honest with other people. It is much more difficult for me to know the truth about myself than it is for me to tell my wife what I see and what I do in an honest, open way. We deceive ourselves so easily. Are you like me? I can talk myself into almost anything if you'll just give me a few minutes. I don't want to tell you of all of the arguments that I've given myself for buying some of the cars I've bought through the years. I mean, I should not have done it. We didn't have the money. We didn't need it. But I made the greatest argument, and I believed myself. If I buy this new multiple $1,000 car, I will save $50 on my income tax. Saving money is good. I am good. The car is bought. And I go away, and I've deceived myself, and I didn't even think I deceived myself. I just buy it. And then there are much deeper issues about how we really are that are even harder to face, aren't there? It's hard to be honest with others, especially those close to us, and it's even harder to know the truth about ourselves and face it, but it's hardest of all to be honest before God. Now, you might resist that statement, but I'll just leave it with you. It's hardest of all to be truly honest before God. He matters the most. And we're most vulnerable to Him. And it's hard. The corollary to that is that the church, the family of the Father, the people where the love of God ought to be most unconditionally expressed, should be the place and the people and the environment in which we are able to live the most honestly. Because it is a place of grace and truth and acceptance in God's grace, it ought to be the fellowship in which we can live most transparently. But it rarely ever is. And I don't say that indictingly. I just say that because that's the way we are. Acts chapter 5 holds our next mark of a great church. Acts chapter 5, I'm going to ask you to follow with me as I read the first 11 verses. It is a story, a narrative. You know it well. Please hear this. Acts chapter 5, verse 1. But a certain man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property and kept back some of the price for himself with his wife's full knowledge, and bringing a portion of it, he laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back some of the price of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not under your control? Why is it that you have conceived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God. And as he heard these words, Ananias fell down and breathed his last, and great fear came upon all who heard of it. And the young men arose and covered him up, and after carrying him out, they buried him. Now there elapsed an interval of about 3 hours, and his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter responded to her, Tell me whether you sold the land for such and such a price. And she said, Yes, that was the price. Then Peter said to her, Why is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they shall carry you out as well. And she fell immediately at his feet and breathed her last. And the young men came in and found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. And great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things. Please notice that the response to Ananias' death and the response to his wife's death is wrapped up in the words, and great fear came upon the whole church. Of course. Wouldn't you have? Great fear came upon the whole church. Please, again, read with me our working definition of the church. Can we get that? There it is, ahead of me. You already have it. Here we go. Please read with me. Again, the church is not a set of buildings nor an institution. The church is a set of relationships in which all kinds of people become brothers and sisters by being born into God's family. Just as the greatness of a family is not measured by the size of their house, the vastness of their savings, or the number of children they have, neither are these things the true measure of the church. Any family of any size, in any place, can be great. Thank you. It's easy to know the facts of this event. It can be a little more difficult to know the truth. We can tell what happened here because the narrative is plain, but we can have a hard time understanding why. The facts are obvious. Ananias and Sapphira sell a piece of land. They bring half the proceeds to the church and leave it there. And they say, we sold a piece of land, and this is what we got for it, and we're giving it to the church. Peter says, you're telling me you're giving the church the full amount you received? Yes, they reply, that's what we're doing. Peter says, you're lying. You're lying to God. You're about to die. And they do. And God pronounces death on two people who don't tell the whole truth to the church and to God. Well, God doesn't do that today. I mean, if God did that today, a series of hearses would line up in front of this building. And tomorrow we wouldn't have enough ministers to the funerals because they would have died too. So we never find this occurring again. It's a one-time event in the church. So if God still isn't doing this, and if this is just a one-time event in the church, then what is it trying to say to us? Why did he tell us about it? please notice that the text makes sure, and I know you got it, but let me say it. The text makes sure we understand the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem was not that they chose to only give half the money to the church. That was not the issue. The heart of the problem was what? They lied about it. It wasn't how much they gave, it was that they lied. The issue was not generosity, it was dishonesty before God and before the church. I believe that here, the church is being taught a very important lesson. In a most dramatic and powerful way, God is saying to the church of that day and His church in every day since then, in my body, in my family, dishonesty kills. Deceit is deadly. And the reason that those two people died was that He wanted to say to us, it doesn't just bother a little bit that you're not truthful. It doesn't just get complicated and make things hard. Dishonesty in relationships in the family of God brings disastrous dying. Now, I don't mean physical dying. The death of relationships, the death of integrity, the death of power and witness, the death of all kinds of things. It is a call for the church to be marked by the phrase that what you see is who and what we are. There's no pretense. There's no putting on a show. There's no appearing to be one way, but really being another. During most of my high school years, which were by and large a Death Valley experience for me, any of you have that kind of high school time? I did. I worked as a stock boy in a local store. Today it would be a local convenience store of some kind. Well, not really a convenience store. Down in our part of the world, we have dollar stores, that kind of store. You know, a variety store is what we called it way back in the old ages, in the dark ages when we lived in caves. I reported every afternoon after school and worked in that store until early evening when the store closed. Among the tasks assigned to me was the lowly task of restocking the shelves. That was my job. They didn't trust me with the cash register or anything else, just restock the shelves. Just inside the stockroom door, over on the left, in a large, rough rack, the store manager kept stacks and stacks of what were called shams for the display shelves. Shams were nothing more than long rectangular blocks of wood, some 2, some 3, some 4 inches thick, the width of the shelves. And they had one purpose. When merchandise, such as baseballs or Barbie dolls or kitchen towels, on the display shelves in the store ran low, and there were no more baseballs or Barbie dolls or towels back in the stockroom to restock the shelf, you took a sham or shams from that rack and you put them in the shelf. And then you put the remaining merchandise back on top of it. It looked like you had a full shelf, but you didn't. It was a sham display. What you saw was not the way it was. Now, shams in baseballs and Barbie dolls and towels to create a good display is not a moral issue. But shams in the family of the church are a huge issue. When we put our lives in such a shape that we appear to be what we are not, then we have done something disastrous. I want to point out 3 shams that the church can have. The list is endless. I'm illustrating here with these 3. I've been to a few churches that had their shams stacked right outside the door. Now, you couldn't see them, but they were there. And when you came in, you better put those shams in if you weren't the right shape, because they were going to give you trouble if you didn't. In a great church, a truly great church, there are no moral shams stacked by the front door. Now, don't misunderstand. This church holds forth a high moral standard. I'm not lessening that at all. They hold a high moral standard. They teach the finest of Christian ethics, unapologetically and uncompromisingly they do. It isn't that their moral stance on our lives is unfocused or weak, or what they believe about right living doesn't matter. It's not that at all. They can be very strong on that. Rather, it means in this church, when you come inside this fellowship, whether it's in the building or in the home or in a gathering someplace else, when you come inside this fellowship, you can come and be embraced by them without having to prop up your life morally before you come in and are embraced. In a truly great church, they teach the truth with great heart and life about how devastating adultery really is. They never back up on how devastating it is. But when the adulterous person comes through the door, they don't back up. They don't turn away. They don't say, we're only going to receive you if you somehow appear to not be who you really are. The church without shams, the one in which you live honestly before God and before others, often, and this is an image in many places, but I really appreciate it, often has mud tracked on its carpet from the dirty feet that have come in to be part of the fellowship. And if you believe the church shouldn't be soiled by dirty feet, then I probably can't be there. In this church, you don't have to pretend that you're more righteous than you are. Now, they speak the truth to you. Everybody understand that? They speak the truth. But they don't speak the truth. Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's not the way they speak the truth. They speak the truth. Brother, do you know what this is doing to you? And did you know there's a huge difference between telling someone the truth? That is horrible. We don't like that. We shouldn't. And telling the truth with tears, with your arm around that life, saying, I hate to see you destroying yourself this way. Both tell the truth. One tells it with love, and one tells it with self-righteousness. And if you live in a church that tells the truth with self-righteousness, and you still want to stay there, you soon learn to put in moral shams, that you're not going to reveal who you really are sometimes. Number two, the truly great church has no theological shams placed at the end of the rows of seats. Take one and insert it to make yourselves appear to take a proper theological shape before you're seated, please. Not at all. Once again, this church teaches the truth. They teach the Scripture in its fullness and its completeness without compromise. They don't flinch from the validity and the purity of biblical truth. They believe without apology the truths about God and man and this world and the next. But when you come in, and when you're with these people, if you're at a point in your life where you have to say, I have to tell you the truth, I'm not sure about this matter of Jesus forgiving all my sins. I don't know about that. I'm wrestling with some things in me, and I just don't know whether he really forgives those things or not. This church does not throw up its collective hands and say, oh, no, you can't say that. Of course you can say that. You're received, not on the basis of your theological correctness. In one of the churches I pastored, the last church I pastored in South Florida, there was this lady. She was a wonderfully gifted lady in terms of her intellect, and she was one of those fully right-brained, left-brained persons. She had this tremendous ability to deal with facts and figures and analyze, but she also was a person of poetry and beauty. And she began coming to that church with her husband, and he was a believer and she wasn't. And she came, and she thought so hard and so deep about things that she had all kinds of questions. And she knew she wasn't a believer. And she came to that church not for a week or a month or a series of months. She came to that church years and years and years. And she didn't hide her questions. I don't know. Are you sure? But what about? And she could ask those questions in that church. And you know what they did? They said, that's a great question. Let's talk about it. And they never once, not for a moment, made her hard, unbelieving question create a distance with her. She came to see me as pastor not too long after I'd come there, and she sat down in my office and she said, I just need to be honest with you. That's a good beginning, isn't it? Unless they're beginning to disassemble you, you know. I'm going to tell you honestly what I think of you. No, that. But I just need to be honest with you. I come here and it looks like I'm a part of this church, and it feels like I'm part of this church, but I'm not a believer. And that did kind of surprise me because of the way she was just a part of the fellowship. And she talked with me, and I hunger to be, but I can't. And I said to her, because of the kind of person she was, I said, here's what I want you to do. She loved great art, great classical art. She just really, really knew it, and she loved it, and she drew a lot of life from that. I said, you know beauty, you know art. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go from here, and I want you to ponder this question. What is the final source of beauty? What is the final source of beauty? You go trace it back, and you keep going back and back and back until you go to the final, ultimate source of all the beauty that you so appreciate. Okay. I didn't hear anything from her until several years later on an Easter Sunday morning. On Easter Sunday morning, we had a big tent outside our church, and we had a big breakfast, and we had a sunrise service. And on that Easter Sunday morning, we had the sunrise service. We were having our breakfast. It was a rather large church. And she came dressed in her Easter finery, and she was beaming. And she said to me, Pastor, I want you to know that on this Easter day, I not only hear what this church says about Jesus, I know him in my life. And she became a radiant believer. But she never had to pretend, because that's what a great church does. Number 3, in a great church you don't have to have moral shams. In a great church you don't have to have theological shams. And finally, in a great church you don't have to have emotional shams. That is, the church does not prescribe that you must be in a certain emotional framework in order to be a good and functioning member and applauded in their church. If your heart is breaking because your eldest son left home last week in a hard way, you aren't asked to smile anyway. You may weep in this church. If it's the 5th anniversary week of your husband's death and the sadness has ridden in you all week, and now it's Sunday morning when you gather with your brothers and sisters in the Lord, you don't have to pretend that it's been a great week and what a beautiful morning. You can come in and say, I am having a very hard time. Life is really tough right now. My grief is so deep. And they don't ask you to sing and smile. They just put their arms around you and say, we care. It'll be better. Jesus is with you. And when you come in like that and you sit in the corner in reclusive silence because that's all you want to do and you don't have the emotional strength to do any more than sit in the corner in silence, they receive you and recognize it and nod their head and love you and leave you alone. And if last week you had a great week at work, you closed on a tremendous contract, you bought a new luxury car, you had a new child, and you won the lottery. And you come to that church that morning and you say, "It is a great morning, isn't it?" They don't say, "Tone it down." Those things don't really matter. They just celebrate with you and sing and shout with you. And so sometimes I come here and tell you about our granddaughter Allison this morning. And I've shared with you last year especially, because it was so near a time, the homegoing of our daughter Lisa. And I was okay doing that. I didn't go away from it. I have to honestly tell you, in some churches, if I were to share that, I would go away going, "I shouldn't have done that." Well, I saw the way they listened. I saw the way they looked at me. You didn't do that. I never felt for a moment's discomfort, having opened those things to you. In a great church, you're not asked to put any kind of shams, whatever they might be, any kind of shams, so that you can be received and loved by them. When I was a boy, and I suppose some of you were raised in these homes, when I was a boy, my mother and father said endless times to me, "You can tell us anything, and we will deal with it. Only one thing you must not do." What? You must not lie to us. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I heard that. You can tell us anything. We can handle it. We can deal with it. It may be hard, but we can. But if you lie to us, then we can't help you. How many of you grew up in a home where that was one of the things said? Well, it's that way with the church. The death of these two persons was a singular event. It doesn't occur again. As I said, if God did it today, most of us, if not all of us, wouldn't be here, because we've all pretended to be something better than we were when we come to church. Can we just say that? And for pastors, that's toughest of all. Did you know that? It's hardest of all with pastors, because we're supposed to be holy. And how can we let you know that sometimes we're not? So I want to close, and then we're going to open for some discussion. I'm actually going to leave some time tonight, so get ready to challenge me and to teach me. And I mean those words. I want to make 4 summary statements. Please hear them so that my teaching is not distorted, at least not in, if I can keep it from these ways. 1, great honesty doesn't mean you tell everyone everything you're thinking and feeling. That's not what it means. This is not about the church family being a place where you always just let it all out. Sometimes people make that mistake with their earthly families. And I've counseled with enough husbands and wives and parents and children to know that sometimes you need to find the right time and place before you say something. And if you don't, you're going to really end up injuring something. It's just wisdom. It's just kindness. It's not deceit. Sometimes people make that mistake with their earthly family, and they just always let everything fly. And sometimes there are people in the church who, that's what they do. They don't have any discipline. And that's not what I'm talking about. Everybody understand that? I'm not talking about you just telling everything about everything. You're not called on to do that. But you don't pretend, and there's a difference, isn't there? There's a difference between not saying everything and then pretending to be something you're not. There's a difference. That's what I'm talking about. Number 2, people being contradictory in their actions or deeds doesn't always mean they're being deceitful. People being contradictory in their actions or deeds doesn't always mean they're being deceitful or dishonest. I've met people who thought that if someone said something on one day and then a few months later said something else, they were purposefully deceiving them. They weren't purposely deceiving them. They were just incomplete vacillating people like we all are, making a journey, trying to be whole and not there yet. Now, you can say one thing in one setting and another thing in another setting just to fool people and deceive them. You can do that. But just because somebody does that doesn't mean they're trying to deceive you. How many of you have done that? You all have. You all have. That's one of the problems with being honest. But honesty is not the same as consistency, because we're not yet perfected people. We don't live perfectly consistent lives. We vacillate, we change. So don't label someone as lying to you. They're not setting out to deceive you. They're working their way. And they forgot where they've been. Does that make sense? I don't feel like I'm expressing it very well, but it's really important. Number 3, the church family receives this honesty from their leaders without dismissing them or letting that cause them to withdraw from their leaders. You in this body of Christ, in this gathering of brothers and sisters, will, and I love Steve and Terry, please, okay, but you will never, in all the long history that your church has been or will be, you will never have a pastor that is absolutely, entirely, without question, nothing but honest with you. Wait a minute. But that's true. Because sometimes, he will present himself better than he is. He will. And sometimes his motives may not be all absolutely pure. He may be subject to the same kind of things you are in terms of protectedness and working some agenda. I'm sure your pastor never does that. Yes. No. No. Which, at the beginning of this point? The church family receives this honesty from their leaders without dismissing them or letting them letting that cause them to withdraw. Does that help you? Your leaders, and that's true of your deacons and your Sunday school teachers and your other leaders, your other staff members. It may be kind of hard, and if we need to talk about that in a moment, we will. That your leaders are not trustable because they're perfect. They're not trustable because they're perfect. They're trustable because you know that in the center of their hearts they have your care in their hearts, and they desire to live that out and do right and true to you. That's what makes them trustable. Not their perfection, but the nature of their heart toward you. That they love you and care about you and want to do that which brings life and blessing to you. But they won't always do that. I've been a pastor almost 50 years, and I tell you, they won't always do that. And when you say, I smell a little smoke there, just pray for them. Number 4, the church family receives this honesty from people who don't yet have the language, habits, and decorum of the church culture. They receive it without criticism or backing up, and they're patient with a person as he becomes a regular part of his new family. You remember I told you in the previous hour about Sherry and Carl and their 8 adopted children, and all 8 of those children were challenged in some ways. And did you know that Carl and Sherry had to put up with some behaviors that were not the esteemed behaviors of their family? Right? They had to go through periods of time when every one of those children said and acted ways that were not their family's ways. And when they did, they didn't shame them into silence. They didn't deal with them in such a way that those children had to start pretending. They just helped them to grow. They walked with them from there. They dealt with it. They didn't just pass it by, everything's okay. They dealt with it, but they didn't reject it. They didn't build in this need to pretend. You all know the phrase, the elephant in the room. What does that phrase, the elephant in the room, mean? It means that there's something big and important that some, if not all of the people, know about, but nobody's talking about. And everybody's pretending that it's not there. The classic examples of that are alcoholic families. You probably have some of those families right here tonight in which there's someone in the family that's deeply alcoholic, but nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever is honest about that. And the person pretends about it, the whole family pretends about it, and they go on for decades pretending about it. And what kind of family life do they have? It's terribly broken and incomplete, isn't it? There are all other kind of things that are elephants in the room with families. Churches kind of have elephants in the room too. What you have to have is such an understanding that you're brothers and sisters, and you receive one another in grace and love, so that those elephants in the room don't have to grow. They show up early, and they're dealt with openly. And it doesn't mean you tell everything about everyone in your church. Probably need to add that. Okay? Being honest doesn't mean you're honest about everyone else. Well, we probably ought to add that one. You don't have to be honest for someone else, okay? You understand what this statement means? If you see so-and-so over here, and you don't have to go tell that. You take care of your own life and your own honesty with the church. And don't go about trying to be honest for someone else. Well, great honesty, it matters. Because deceit in the family is a killer. And deceit in the church family is a killer. Comments or questions? We have just a few minutes about this or one of the previous sessions if you have comments or questions from previous sessions. Anything? I know this has been a very different kind of session, hasn't it? I understand that. No? Yes, please. No, don't do that. I wouldn't raise my hand.
So, I don't know if I misunderstood it or something, but we would expect a type of honesty and from those in authority, especially in the church. So, did I hear that it is not possible? I mean, it is not possible always that those in leadership will be honest. And if it is so, I do understand everybody is human.
Yes.
If it is so, shouldn't we, as the members of the church, or shouldn't we as a fellow brother, don't we have the responsibility just to let them know that this is not the way it is supposed to be? Because one thing that comes to my mind is, I know a great apostle like Peter. He ate when James, as long as James was not there, he was okay with the Gentiles.
Yeah.
And then Paul says, I asked him on his face or something like that.
Yes.
I don't remember the exact verse. So the first question is it wrong for us to expect that kind of honesty in a leadership, especially in a person who's plays an important role in the church. And secondly, if we don't see that kind of honesty, shouldn't how are we supposed to act?
Yeah, those are great questions. I want to make a difference. Thank you. Those are great questions. I want to make a difference between a life of pretense, a life of dishonesty, a ministry of dishonesty, and moments where the person is not really being as forthright as they need to be. I want to make a difference between that. You should not have a church leader that practices pretense and dishonesty as a way of life. You shouldn't receive that. Now, you love that brother, sister, you care for them, but they don't have the life that can have integrity that's needed to be leader. So I want to make clear that I'm not advocating here, and certainly Scripture does not teach that one can have dishonesty and deceit as a way of life and somehow function in a significant role in the life of the church. But I will say, and I'm uncomfortable saying it, I was uncomfortable when I said it earlier, and I'm uncomfortable saying it now, but it's true that no leader will be, across time, 100% honest and transparent with you. That is so hard to say. And it's hard to hear, isn't it? But I can't say the other. Do you understand? If I don't say that, then I have to say that you only receive a leader that is 100% of the time, absolutely honest and open with you about everything, and doesn't ever do or anything with something hidden over here on the side. That's just not going to be. We are just little children. And we're not that grown, even the best of us. So I will say that. The second question, should we deal with it? I want to say yes, but not, you're a leader, how can you do that? Not like that. But like, wow, you're really important to us. Your work among us is so sacred, and we love you so deeply. Can we talk about this? Because I think I see something that maybe needs to be taken care of. Do you understand the difference? The one is this in your face, how dare you? And the other is, you still have a ways to grow too, don't you? And I will tell you as a pastor, there have been some times in my life when I have had lay men come to me individually, quietly, without speaking to anyone else, okay? No getting a group together and saying, psh, 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 psh. No. But coming to me out of love for me and saying out of love for me, Pastor, we really wonder about why you're really promoting this. Why are you really asking us to do this? Are you really teaching this, and do you really know that it's true? Are you seeing what it does when you do that? That needs to be done. Because the shepherd-hearted leader, whether pastor, deacon, whatever, will grow from that, will be blessed by that. I'm very grateful for those men who have had the courage to do that with their pastor. And very often, it's been deacon chairman who did, because that was their role. I'm not saying you have to do that, okay? But I'm saying that's the people who would. Now, have I had some people come to me, and I'm going to be honest with you, Pastor, and just dress me down about anything they could think of? Yes, I've had that. I've had people come into my office and just absolutely skin me with their honesty. That is so wrong. That is so wrong. and does nothing for the kingdom and nothing for them and nothing for your leader. But don't pretend. Don't pretend about your leaders like you don't want to pretend about anything else. Thanks. That's a great 2 questions. Okay. Let's have some more, because we're dealing with really stuff, aren't we?
Just kind of a, whoa.
Yeah, Steve.
Just kind of a word right there is that sometimes all of us pretend that we're doing better
Then we
than
are.
we're doing.
Yeah.
Whether it be emotionally or whatever, you know. And we're not always 100% transparent.
Yeah.
One of the ways that we need to grow is in our trust, going back to that first message, I think, or
Yes.
second.
That's absolutely right.
And
You can only be honest if you can trust.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You can only be honest to the degree you can trust. There was a time in my ministry when, because of some things that happened, I just got spiritually empty on the inside. I mean, I wasn't doing anything immoral or anything, but I was just emptied on the inside. It was like a desert on the inside of me. And I kept going, and I kept performing, and I kept teaching, and I kept preaching, and I should have, okay? But I did not go to any one of the magnificently trustable men in my church. Men who loved me and cared about me, that were enormously trustable. I didn't go to any one of them and say, I need to tell you how I am and ask you to pray for me. I would just ask you the question, should I have done that? And the answer is what? Yes, I should have. I should have. I didn't.
Why didn't you?
I'm the pastor. It's the truth. I can't let them know this about me. I pretended with them. I didn't pretend out of a desire to deceive them, a desire to manipulate them. I pretended out of a desire to make sure they kept loving me and receiving me. That's why I did. And then one day, in an innocent conversation, I think I shared this with you last year, in an innocent visit, sitting on his front porch, in an evening, cool evening after a meal with his wife, and my wife was inside with the wife, and he and I were visiting, that wonderful man said, Pastor, just want to ask you, how's your prayer life? Wow. It wasn't any good. Oh, it's fine. You know, it's up and down. But on the way home, I repented. That wasn't true. And I called my brother and said, that wasn't true. And in that honesty, God had permission then from me to begin to change me and renew me. Do you understand that? That's what I mean. Please ask some more questions. I don't want you to go away having been injured by my words. Yes.
How do you navigate?
Voice from above.
How do you navigate difficult areas of your testimony when you're teaching and things like that? How do you be transparent and as a pastor with your testimony?
Transparency doesn't mean that we tell everything, but transparency means we don't lie about anything, and we don't make ourselves appear some way we aren't. And I'm not difficult parts of our testimony. Tell me what that means, David.
Things that you've done in the past that maybe, as a leadership position, you're afraid it's going to affect the way that your congregation or your students look at you.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think honesty calls for us to. I'll say this and then you come back at me. I don't think honesty calls for us to say everything about ourselves. I don't think that's the call. I think the call is to not pretend, to not be something we aren't, and to make sure we don't do that, even in giving personal words about our lives. But I don't believe that the pastor is called on to stand in front of his congregation and tell everything to a whole congregation. I don't think that's it. Does that answer, David? No, come back at me.
Yeah, I think it does. Is there ever a time when there would be a situation like a small group that you feel like, I really feel like I need to share this?
I would ask the question, why do I feel like I need to share it? Do I feel like I need to share it because emotionally I just want to unload? Or do I feel like I need to share it because these men are going to think something of me that they shouldn't think? They're going to see me in a way that's not true if I don't do this. I think those are two very different questions. I don't know. Keep pushing me, David. Yes, John?
I think also,
Get me out of this. Hurry.
I think you also need to be careful with the audience.
Yeah.
What you confess, because you're trying to get it off of your chest, may do more harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it can be very selfish to tell some things to some people. It can be very selfish. It can be all about you and what you need, and not about them and what they need. And I think that's the difference I'm trying to make. And when I talk about living honestly, I don't mean telling everything about your life. I mean about not pretending, about not putting in shams, about not standing up and being some kind of holy person, because you're not. That's really, I don't know. Let's keep working at it till we get it right.
I don't know if it'll help or not, but my life, like Terry knows, I came from such a broken life that there's all kinds of stuff back there. And anyway, there's lots of stuff back there that I just never share with people, publicly. And there's been some rare times that I've taken some pieces of that and shared it with another broken person in a situation that I felt like I could minister with, that God would use that. And it's been some very sacred moments that have been very, very, very rare through the years. But again, there's a lot of stuff back there that I could share in a sense for dramatic testimony. But I don't feel my heart, I would not feel right in doing so. Again, I don't know if that helps or not.
That's a great question, David. Living truthfully with your family, your earthly family. I want to go back. Let me just try to say this. And I hope I haven't dismantled your ideas about pastors and church spiritual leaders. Well, or maybe I'm glad I have, because you don't need an elephant in the room, okay? But the ability to trust what you tell is enormously important. Remember how to define trust? Trust is taking something very sacred in me, something that matters in me, and handing it over in words to another person, trusting this sacred piece of me to this other person, and them receiving it in such a way that they honor me and love me in the way they receive it. And they don't misuse it or tell it or abuse me or make fun of me or reject me because I give them that. That's trust. You will have a much higher level of trust with some people than with others. And you have to be careful and not put a weight on that trust bridge that it hasn't been built strong enough to stand. Do you understand that statement? You don't want to load something that is a 500-pound weight in your life on a truss bridge that's only spiderweb thin and can only handle a 5-pound weight, what's it going to do to the relationship? It's going to break it. So you don't do it. You're not being dishonest unless you're pretending to be something you're not. That's where it turns. Who's the person? I could just ask you from the little bit of time. Who's the person I most trust in my whole life? My wife. We have spent over 50 years building a trust bridge. Right? So there's nothing I can't load onto that bridge. It's going to stand. It's going to stay. I know that. But that's not true for every relationship I have with everyone. So thank you, because that trust is so critical to that. But at this I don't have to tell everything, but I do have to not pretend about how I am and who I am. I still remember the Sunday that I was preaching a certain message. I can't remember what the text was right now. And I wasn't doing it to show. I meant it. I walked out to my people and I stood in front of them and said, "Hi, my name is Bob Adams, and I'm a sinner." And I watched that congregation go, huh. But it was true, isn't it? And I went on to talk about, I don't share with you from my perfections. I share with you from the grace of God and His faithfulness. The pastors that I have great difficulty with are the pastors who present themselves to somehow be these incredible, incredible people who are just God's gift to the world. I go, oh, no. 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 Please, thanks for letting me rant on there in that moment. Is it gaining any clarity about what it means to live honestly in the body? Other questions or comments, please? We're past time. Can I pray for you? Lord, these are your children, my brothers and sisters. You yourself live in their lives. And now, Lord, it's really, really important, and it's very large in me in this moment, that you teach them and that they take away the words that have been said out loud in this place, and that you, by your indwelling Spirit, teach them what is true and what is not, and keep them from any error, no matter how strongly I may have spoken it, so that they may live more whole and complete before you in truthfulness and grace. I trust you to do this in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen. Thank you. See you tomorrow evening, I trust. We're going to talk about the mark of joy in a great congregation. It's my favorite. That's why I saved it till last.